Anybody curious about what modes are? The 7 modes of the major scale? Some people are very educated in this, and some people have no idea what it is, never even heard the word in relationship to music. And then there's some folks, I have a lot of students who are like, yeah, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is. And so this is what it is. It's actually pretty simple and it's kind of cool. I'm not a math whiz, but I've always really loved the mathematical quality of music theory. So what you have is you have 7 different notes in the major scale, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th note is the same as the first note, and that's why it's called an octave. All right, every single one of these notes can be the bottom note of a triad or a chord. And a chord, a proper triad, is every other note. So do, re, mi, all at the same time is not a triad. Do, mi, sol, that is a triad because we are skipping a note. So those are triads, every other note. Now, let's say that we're playing a chord that starts with do. Do, mi, sol, that's what we call the 1 chord. Go ahead and write this over here. So the 1 chord is do on the bottom, mi in the middle, sol on top. The 2 chord is, guess what? Re, fa, la. We'll jot that in. The 3 chord, mi, sol, ti. The 4 chord, fa, la, do. Let's go ahead with the 5 chord, sol, ti, re. 6 chord, la, do, mi. And the 7 chord, ti, re, fa. Now this little wacky chord right here, this is what is called a diminished chord. Okay, all of these other chords, you've got major and minor, okay? The major are indicated by the uppercase Roman numeral, the minor are indicated by the lowercase. And all that means really is you have you have whole steps and half steps, right? So do to re, if you were to look on a piano and let's say that C was do, and you go from C to D, that's do to re. Now there is a little black note between C and D. That means that you are skipping a step. That if you were to go C, little black note, D, that would be moving chromatically. Those are half steps. But since we're skipping that little center note between C and D, this note right here, which is C sharp or D flat, since we're skipping that, that's called a whole step. It's also referred to as a major second, okay? So a major scale is all whole steps except for between mi and fa and ti and do. That's what makes a major scale sound like a major scale. So do to re, whole step, re to mi, whole step. Mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi. You can't get any smaller than that in Western music, okay? That is where your half step is. So we've got whole, half, and then fa, sol, whole, sol, la, whole, oops, la, ti, whole, and then ti, do, ti, do, ti, do, ti, do. That's another half step. 2 half steps between mi and fa and ti and do. No matter what key you're in, that's what it's going to sound like. If you're in the key of G and G is do, then there's always going to be a half step between mi and fa. If you're in the key of C, the relationship stays the same. B flat can be do, D flat can be do. Any of these notes can be do, and the relationship between the notes will always be the same, no matter what key you're in. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And because of that, whenever you have a third, this is called a third because we're going 1, 2, 3. If you're skipping a note and going to the one after it, it's called a third. Whenever you have a third that includes one of these half steps, that chord is going to be a minor chord. If the very first interval is including this half step. So you can see between do and mi, There's no half step. Therefore, that's going to be a major chord if it starts with do to mi. But if we start a chord on re, re, fa, there's a half step there. That means that chord is going to be minor. If we start a chord with mi on the bottom, there's a half step there. It's going to be minor. If we start a chord with fa on the bottom, look, no half step, it's a major chord. If we start a chord with sol on the bottom, sol to ti, once again, no half step, it's a major chord. La to do, you can see here's another half step, therefore that chord is going to be minor. Ti to re, this is the weird chord. And what a diminished chord is, really, it's a minor chord that got squished. So I like to think of diminished, okay? I guess that's your introduction to numbered chords. And I also wanted to tell you about modes and how those fit in. Let's say you've got a chord, do, mi, sol, right? A perfect mode to go along with that would be a scale that starts on do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Let's say we're playing a chord that has re on the bottom. Re, fa, la. A great mode to go with that. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re. Okay, we're gonna pause and make a whole separate video about modes. Okay. I did a video previously that was, I intended it to be about modes, and then I ended up talking about numbered chords instead, but they're totally related. What we're gonna do now, we're going to erase this. Ah! All right. I'm gonna write out the major scale. See if I can fit the whole thing twice. Actually, we'll just end on T, and you'll see why in a little bit. Okay. Now, each one of these notes can be the first note of a scale, all right? If you're singing from do to do, that right there is a major scale, okay? If you're singing from la to la, that is a minor scale. And my husband and I can argue about this sometime. Basically, it's la minor or do minor. And we'll get into that in a different video. But when we're talking about modes, it's really important to recognize that if you sing the same set of notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but you start and end on la, that's a minor scale. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, major. Now let's start do, ti, la. Same set of notes, starting and ending on la. La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. That's a minor scale, okay? What's important to remember is that we have two half steps between mi and fa and between ti and do. And I will go ahead and highlight this one as well, between mi and fa. Okay. So those are two modes, all right? But think about it, there's 7 notes. So we have 5 more modes that we can come up with. All of these modes have fun Greek names. Ionian is the word for a major scale. I love that one. And if you're doing a minor scale, its fancy Greek name is Aeolian. Okay, so we have, 5 different notes, right? We still haven't sung a scale starting on re, mi, fa, sol, or ti. All right. If we sing a scale that starts and ends on re, that is called the Dorian mode. So if this is our do, let's go ahead and sing the Ionian mode one more time. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Let's go backwards. Do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Now let's sing the same set of notes, but instead of starting on do, we're gonna start on re. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re. Backwards. Re, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re. That's your Dorian scale. All right, let's go ahead and sing it starting on mi. This is a fun little word. It's called Phrygian. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi. Backwards. Mi, re, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi. That's one of two scales that actually starts with a half step. So it has kind of a la, da, 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 da. It's got a kind of an exotic sound, right? Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, la, sol, fa, mi. All right, now this next one is one of my favorites. This is called the Lydian scale. I'm going to go ahead and drop down an octave. So we're going to start and end on fa. Fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa. Fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, sol, fa. The only difference between a Lydian scale and a regular Ionian major scale is that the fourth note is a half step higher. So usually when you're singing a major scale, you have a half step between the third and the fourth note. But with a Lydian scale, you have a half step between the fourth and the fifth note. So it has this kind of elevated sound. Fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa. All right. Mixolydian. This is starting and ending on sol. Sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol. Backwards. Sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, sol. So that also sounds a lot like a major scale. The only difference, you can see there's still a half step between the third and the fourth note, like there is if you're singing a major scale, the Ionian. But the next half step is one step before. So instead of having a half step between the second to last note and the last note, you have a half step between the sixth and the seventh note. Let's sing that again. Sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol. Backwards. Sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, sol. We already did Aeolian, so we're going to go ahead and look at this last one. This is called Locrian. Kind of a, well, it's a goofy word. It's got kind of like a devilish sound, right? Kind of like Loki. Okay, so this is starting, ending on T. Ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Backwards. Ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti. And then you arrive back at do, which is your major scale, your Ionian. So just to reiterate, your modes are from do to do, major scale, Ionian. From re to re, Dorian scale. From mi to mi, Phrygian scale. From fa to fa, Lydian scale. Sol to sol, Mixolydian. La to la, your minor scale, Aeolian. And from T to T, your Locrian scale.